Welcome to John Carter Stories. Her father slid the envelope across the table like he was doing me some kind of favor. We think it's best for everyone, he said, that tight, condescending smile plastered on his face. You've had your fun, but our daughter deserves someone who can actually keep up. I didn't touch it. Didn't even flinch. My wife, Sarah, blinked in confusion. Dad, what is this? Her mother leaned in, voice dripping with fake sympathy. It's not personal, sweetheart. We just think it's time you stop living in fairy tales. Ha ha, fairy tales. That's what they called our marriage. Let me introduce myself properly. My name is John Carter. I've been married to Sarah for 3 years now, and she's always believed I'm just this quiet guy who works a modest tech job, drinks cheap coffee from corner shops, and lives as simple as they come. She doesn't know that I'm the silent co-founder of the very company where her father serves as a senior director, and that every single decision he's made for the last 5 years has passed through my hands first. This dinner? I requested it. This table? I chose it. This envelope? I expected it. I opened it slowly, deliberately. Inside was a check. $500,000. To walk away from Sarah. To disappear like I never existed. I looked up at them, and they were watching me like I was already gone, already planning Sarah's future, like I was some forgettable mistake she'd made in college. I folded the check, slipped it back into the envelope, and slid it across the table. Unopened, unwanted. Sarah stared at me, then at her parents, her voice shaking. What the hell is this? Her father didn't even blink. Security, sweetheart. This man, he's not your future. He's a phase. You should have seen Sarah's face. She looked like she'd been slapped across the heart. I remained quiet, because I wanted to see their full colors. No filter, no restraint. And tonight, they were showing me everything. Please subscribe and like this video, and listen to my story till the end. Let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled, because what happened next changed everything. Take the check, her mother said, turning those cold eyes on me. Start over somewhere else. We'll even help you relocate. I let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. Do you think I married Sarah for money? Her father leaned forward, elbows on the table. I think people like you, people who don't come from much, always find their way to women like my daughter. People like me. I smiled then, turned to Sarah. I didn't want to tell you like this. I said gently, I never cared about impressing them. I only ever wanted you to love me for me. What are you talking about? She whispered. I pulled a business card from my coat pocket and slid it across the table. Her father's eye twitched when he saw the logo. Our company. I nodded once. I've owned 49% of it since before you even made director. And just like that, the room went cold. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they knew your worth? Drop a comment below. The silence after I said it felt surgical, sharp, cutting through every assumption they'd made about me. Sarah looked at me like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry or scream. Her father went completely pale. You're lying, he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. Want me to recite the articles of incorporation? Or maybe remind you who approved your recent bonus structure? The one you celebrated with that trip to Monaco. His lips parted, but nothing came out. My wife picked up the business card, turning it over in her trembling hands. Wait, 49%? Her mother laughed nervously, desperately. That's not possible. You're a barista, a nobody. That's what you saw, I said gently, because that's what I let you see. I turned back to Sarah. I stayed silent because I wanted one part of my life not defined by leverage, by money, by people who think love comes with a price tag and a receipt. Her father finally found his voice, shaking with rage. If this is true, then why come here at all? Why subject yourself to this? I met his gaze. Level. Calm. Because I want to see who you were when you thought I was beneath you. He stood, fists clenched on the white tablecloth. You humiliated us. No, I said, rising slowly from my seat. You did that all by yourselves. Then I looked at Sarah. Ready to go? Will Sarah leave with me, or will she stay with her parents? Keep listening to find out. We left the restaurant in complete silence. The valet brought our car around, and Sarah didn't speak until we were halfway home, the city lights blurring past the windows. You were going to keep this from me forever? Her voice was small, hurt. I glanced at her. No, but I wasn't going to tell you at a dinner table while your father tried to buy me off like some seasonal intern. She looked away, out the window. I don't know what to feel right now. Start with the truth, I said softly. You married a man who builds quietly, who doesn't need to wear his money to prove his worth. She was quiet for a long, long time. Then, so softly I almost missed it, you let me believe we were struggling. We weren't, I said. I just wanted a real relationship, not a performance. Ah, the pain in her voice broke something in me. Later that night, after we got home, after the silence settled heavy in our apartment, her father called. Twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. Then came an email. One line. We need to talk. This affects the board. There it was. He'd finally connected the dots. Because I didn't just co-own the company. I held the patent on the software that made their recent billion-dollar valuation possible. And unlike his inflated titles, my name was actually on the legal paperwork. They tried to erase me with a check. Now they were learning something important. Power doesn't always look loud until it decides to speak. Have you ever had to prove yourself to someone who doubted you? Let me know in the comments. The next board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. I didn't RSVP. I didn't send confirmation. Instead, I showed up early, not in some expensive suit, but in the same gray sweater they'd always mocked when I picked Sarah up from company events. I wanted them to recognize me, not as a stranger, but as the man they tried to dismiss. The moment I stepped into that glass conference room, silence hit like a pressure drop in an airplane cabin. Her father sat at the head of the table, already pale, already sweating. Two directors whispered to each other. One man from legal looked like he'd swallowed something rotten. I took the empty seat at the far end of the table. The power seat, some would call it. They waited for me to speak. I didn't. Instead, I opened my leather folder and placed a single page in front of me. The original founder agreement, signed by me, co-signed by the original investors. The document that proved not only my 49% stake, but the veto rights clause her father had conveniently forgotten about. The meeting began. Standard agenda items, quarterly reports, budget projections. I let them go through the motions, watching, listening. Then, right as the vote began on a major acquisition, one her father had already promised shareholders publicly, I calmly raised my hand. Vetoed. The room stopped breathing. I leaned back in my chair. Shall we talk now? Her father's voice was tight, strangled. Marcus, this acquisition is strategic. We've already announced it to press. You announced it, I corrected. Without consulting a co-founder, without a proper board vote, and definitely without checking clause 17.3 of our operating agreement. The legal advisor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew I was right. One of the directors, an older woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. This puts us in breach of investor disclosure laws. I didn't smile. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to remind them that the man they tried to pay off was the same man who protected this company's core infrastructure when they didn't even know what two-factor authentication meant. I'm not trying to sink the ship, I said clearly. I'm trying to steer it properly. Her father clenched his fists under the table. You're making this personal. No, I replied. You did that. The moment you slid that envelope across the table and tried to trade your daughter's happiness for your illusion of control. What happens next will shock you. Keep listening. Silence filled that boardroom like water filling a sinking ship. Finally, one of the younger board members, a guy named Thomas who'd always been decent to me, cleared his throat. Maybe it's time we stop treating Mr. Reed like a threat and start recognizing him as the partner he legally is. I stood slowly. Good, I said, because starting tomorrow, I'm not just your silent partner anymore. I'm stepping into the light. Ha. You should have seen the panic in that room. The press release went live Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus Reed named co-CEO of Lindstrom Global after strategic board restructure. Within minutes, my phone exploded. Former colleagues, old college friends, even two of Sarah's cousins who once joked that I'd married up were suddenly calling, texting, congratulating me. The story hit differently now. I wasn't just the husband anymore. I was the man steering the company. They all thought I had no business being near. I walked into headquarters that morning without needing a visitor badge. The receptionist actually stood up when she saw me heading toward the executive elevator. Her father was already inside. Alone. We didn't speak for 5 floors. Then he said, voice low, "You think you won?" I looked straight ahead at the brushed steel doors. This was never a game. He scoffed. "You humiliated me in front of the entire board." I turned to him then, calm as still water. "No, you did that the moment you confused quiet for weakness." The elevator doors opened. I stepped out first. Ever had someone underestimate you, only to regret it later? Share your experience below. That day, I made 2 major changes. First, I rehired the entire junior developer team he'd laid off last quarter for budget optics. Good people, talented people, people who deserve better. Second, I reassigned him to a non-voting advisory role. Still paid generously, still present at the company, but no longer in a room when real decisions were being made. He didn't argue, because he knew. The man he dismissed at dinner was now the one signing off on everything, including his parking spot. Sarah met me on the rooftop terrace that evening. The same rooftop where we'd first talked about dreams bigger than rent money and ramen noodles, back when we were just 2 people who believed in each other. She leaned against the railing, looking out at the city skyline, the sun setting orange and pink behind the buildings. "You really never planned to tell me?" she asked softly. I stood beside her, close enough that our shoulders touched. "Not until I knew for sure you loved me for the man I am, not the name I carry." She nodded slowly, processing. "And now the name matters," I said, "but the reason it means anything is still you." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the envelope from that awful dinner, creased, still sealed. "I never opened it," she said, her voice breaking just a little. "Didn't need to." Oh, my heart. I took it from her hands, looked down at the offer her parents had written to erase me from their daughter's life. Then I tore it in half. Not for drama, not for show, but because it never mattered. It never had any power over us. "I'm sorry they saw you that way," she whispered, tears finally falling. I looked at her, really looked at her. They only saw what I let them see. She smiled through her tears. "Still the quiet one, huh?" I shook my head. "Not anymore. The final part will bring everything full circle. You won't want to miss this." Behind us, the lights of our company glowed across the high-rise glass windows. No longer just his company. No longer my secret. The next few weeks were a whirlwind, honestly. Media interviews, strategy meetings, long nights restructuring departments that had been mismanaged for years. But the hardest part wasn't the business. It was watching Sarah navigate her relationship with her parents. Her mother called every day for a week straight. Sarah answered exactly once. I wasn't there, but she told me about it later, sitting on our couch with a cup of tea gone cold in her hands. She cried, Sarah said quietly. Said they only wanted what was best for me, that they were protecting me. "What did you say?" I asked. I told her that protection doesn't come with a price tag and a check made out to my husband. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the pain underneath. I told her I'm a grown woman who chose her own life, and if they couldn't respect that, then we had nothing left to talk about. Oh, I was so proud of her in that moment. Her father, though, he was a different story. He stopped calling Sarah entirely. Instead, he started showing up at the office, sitting in his new advisory office, glaring at me through the glass walls whenever I passed by. I never gloated, never rubbed it in. But I also never pretended he hadn't tried to buy me off like I was some kind of pest problem. What would you do if your own family betrayed your trust like this? Comment below. One afternoon, about a month after everything changed, I was in my office reviewing quarterly projections when there was a knock on my door. It was him. Sarah's father stood in my doorway, looking older somehow. Tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "It's a free country." He sat down heavily, like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, just stared at his hands. Then, I was wrong. I set down my pen. Waited. "I was wrong about you," he continued, and his voice actually cracked. "I thought I was protecting my daughter. I thought money and status were what mattered. I thought you were just some guy taking advantage of her kindness." He looked up at me, and weeping, there were actual tears in his eyes. "But you loved her when she had nothing to offer you. You loved her when I was actively working against you. You loved her enough to stay quiet, to stay humble, to let her choose you every single day without knowing who you really were." I didn't speak, just listened. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I don't deserve it, but I am asking for a chance. A chance to know the man my daughter chose. The man I was too blind to see." Ha ha ha, I won't lie, I didn't expect that. I leaned back in my chair, studied him for a moment. "You hurt her," I said simply. "You made her feel like her love wasn't enough, like her choices weren't valid. That's not something you fix with one conversation." "I know," he whispered. "But," I continued, "if you're willing to actually show up, not as a director who got humbled, but as a father who wants to rebuild trust with his daughter, then we can talk." He nodded, wiping his eyes quickly. "Thank you." After he left, I sat there for a while just thinking. Tell me in the comments, would you have given him a second chance? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. The conclusion will leave you speechless. Stay with me. 6 months later, everything had changed again, but in quieter, better ways. Sarah's relationship with her parents was still healing. Slow, careful, like learning to walk on a broken ankle that's just starting to mend. Her mother sent flowers on Sarah's birthday with a card that just said, "I'm trying. I love you." Her father showed up to family dinners now, not with advice or criticism, but with questions. Real questions about our lives, our dreams, what made us happy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that mattered more than anything. The company was thriving. The acquisition I'd vetoed, we restructured it, did it properly, legally, and it turned out even better than the original plan. The junior developers I'd rehired were now leading our most innovative projects. And me? I was finally doing what I'd always wanted to do, building technology that actually helped people, not just made shareholders rich. One evening, Sarah and I went back to that same restaurant where her parents had tried to pay me off. We sat at a different table this time, one by the window with a view of the city lights. "Why here?" Sarah asked, smiling softly. "Because I wanted to replace that memory," I said. "I wanted us to have a better story attached to this place." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You know what I realized?" "What's that?" "You never needed to prove anything to anyone," she said. "You were always exactly who you said you were. Quiet, humble, kind. The money didn't change that. The power didn't change that. You did." Oh, I felt my throat tighten. "I stayed quiet because I wanted you to see me," I said. "Not my bank account, not my title. Just me. I always saw you," she whispered. "From the very first day. We ordered the same cheap wine we used to drink when we were broke college students, back when a $20 bottle felt like a celebration. The waiter looked confused when I specified the brand, but he brought it anyway. Ha ha! Some things are worth keeping simple." As we sat there, talking and laughing and remembering how far we'd come, I realized something important. I didn't need to shout to arrive. I didn't need to prove my worth to people who couldn't see it. I just needed to wait until the silence was mine to break. And when I finally spoke, when I finally stepped into the light, it wasn't for revenge or validation. It was for truth. For Sarah. For us. Her parents learned that power doesn't always look loud. That quiet people aren't weak people. That love without conditions is the only kind worth having. And me? I learned that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to stay silent and when to finally speak. The envelope with that check, we framed it, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that our love was never for sale, that we chose each other every single day, not because of what we had, but because of who we were, and that's worth more than any amount of money they could have offered. So here I am, Marcus Reed, no longer the silent partner, no longer the man in the shadows, just a husband who loves his wife, a co-CEO who believes in building things that matter, and a man who finally learned that true power isn't in being seen. It's in knowing your worth, whether anyone else sees it or not. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying till the end. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to know how far this journey has traveled. And if you've ever been underestimated, ever been dismissed, ever been told you weren't enough, remember this. Your silence isn't weakness. Your humility isn't failure. And when you finally decide to speak, make sure it's on your own terms, not theirs, yours. Subscribe for more real stories about standing your ground, protecting what matters, and proving that quiet strength is still strength. This is Marcus Reed, signing off. And remember, you don't need to be the loudest person in the room to be the most powerful one. You just need to know when it's your turn to break the silence.